Aloha, everybody. I'm back, and I have a new hobby. I got a ukulele in Hawaii because that is what you do in Hawaii. Part of what you do in Hawaii. But I'm going to talk about this. My own stream is playing here. That's cool. Um, and we're going to talk about this journey with um, this new hobby because I think it's going to be the perfect instrument to relate to physics because it has four strings and it makes it very easy to link to four primary perspectives and build from there. And I've never really been very good at music, but I actually was picking up the ukulele pretty quickly, even within like maybe an hour of like messing with it with this person. This woman who sold it to me was teaching me how to do it. Very good sales tactic. Teach somebody a little bit of how to play an instrument if you want them to buy it. But what's up, Torin? By the way, Torin, I found every reptile in Hawaii. Very cool. I'll share pictures during the stream. But I found Jackson's chameleons. We swam with sea turtles. I found a mourning gecko on my back, which was pretty cool. Like, I didn't even have to look for it. It found me. That was very coll. We found tons of day geckos, gold dust day geckos, ground skink, and I think that's pretty much everything on the island. That's other than maybe like house geckos or something, but it was very cool. We were looking for Jackson's chameleon for like an hour, and as we were leaving the area, I found one in a bush. I was like, "There's one." It's very cool. So, now you own a ukulele and a yarmulke. I own multiple yarmulkes, actually, but yeah, I do. I might start wearing yarmulke full time one day. It is like a goal of mine, but I'm not like totally there yet. Yes, I'm drinking In-N-Out. Don't judge. I mean, In-N-Out's actually not bad. It's not that bad, but it's tea and lemonade. I can't drink soda anymore. I haven't drank soda really in years. But yeah, here, check this out. This is I'll show you guys some photos of my trip. It was amazing. I highly recommend going to Maui. I thought it wasn't going to be as amazing as it was, but it was amazing, and I have lots to share. And then we're going to talk about some things that Stephen Wolfram said that are pretty awesome. And but first, we're going to. I didn't buy this shirt, by the way. My family bought me this shirt when they went to Hawaii, and I brought it with me to Hawaii. And it's literally the exact same shirt that everyone who works at every hotel wears, everyone who works at the airport wears, and pretty much everywhere else. It's like the unofficial uniform. I could have totally just pretended to be a valet and just taken someone's sports car at the hotel. And just been like, "Can I take your car?" And they would have literally thought I worked there. That's how much this looks like. Obviously, I wouldn't do that, but that's how much I looked like an employee. It was very funny. But I figured wear it for the stream today. But check this out here and right here, and probably one more video I want to show you guys right here. Yep. Okay. We hiked to the top of Haleakala volcano, and we watched sunrise. We drove there 4 o'clock in the morning. I videotaped the whole thing and sped it up and put it to the Lion King soundtrack. It's pretty good. But you can see my head shaking. It was an amazing trip, I will say. Like, I'm not the biggest like somebody who needs to travel. I do like to travel, but have like a lot of animals, and I don't like leaving work and things like that. But it was totally worth it. Okay, here we go. Check this out, people. It was awesome. Like, look at that. It just, like, it was amazing. You're just over the clouds. Those are all clouds. It was like unlike anything I've ever seen. But this was actually pretty cool too. So I actually saw a picture of this place in a magazine, or something, or on Instagram, and I didn't know where it was, and I always wanted to go here. I had no idea where it was, and we found it by accident. And I didn't even know we were going towards it until the very end. But check out this lava tube, and like where it ends up. It's amazing. This place is amazing. Yeah. Let's go. I am 100% going to get this censored by YouTube because I stole Disney soundtrack songs. Didn't steal it, but I put it on this video. I forgot that Disney is insane. Their algorithm will definitely find it and it will mute it. So if you see this after this and the audio is gone from that part, just know I put it to a cool soundtrack. Then this was the chameleon that we found. I don't know why it's being so choppy. There we go. Kind of. Hold on. I'll just move it. But yeah, it was so cool. I've looked for those for years. They're just such a fascinating animal. They're not native to Hawaii, but they're not considered a pest. And there's a couple feral populations in some parts of California that Paulina and I have looked for them at over the years, and we never found one. So this was the goal of this trip, is one of them. And there we go, it's working. And they're just such cool animals. It's like looking for reptiles in the wild is called herping, because herpetology is the study of reptiles. And that is like a herping dream, was to find Jackson's chameleon. Yeah, it's a little male. Did you have to get someone to take care of your stuff when you were there and back quick enough. I was there and back quick enough. My animals, I have a misting system on them, and so they have water the whole time. And we were only gone about a week and a half, and I just fed everybody a ton of food right before I left. Obviously, snakes can deal with it. They can, you can leave for months if you plan it properly with snakes. But I used to leave them for a month when I would go home for winter break in college. But they the geckos and lizards that I have, I just fed before I left. When I bought this, Adam Sandler was at the same shop like hours before me, apparently. I don't know if he bought a ukulele, but that guy is like very down to earth guy. I've actually seen him once riding his bike in like by himself, just riding his bike in what was it, Cape Cod, like years ago. But apparently everybody told me he just lives part-time on Maui and just like plays basketball next to the beach. You gotta like admire people who have that kind of money and still act like normal people. It's a nice thing. But yeah, so my trip was amazing. I have tons of photos and stuff that I'm gonna share more of, but I wanted to share those quick videos. We found when I moved to LA, before I moved to LA in Arizona, I used to be out in the wilderness all the time looking for wildlife, photographing them. And then when I moved here, it was very rare that I got to do that. So to be able to like go to Hawaii and see everything that was on my list, I swam with a massive seal, a monk seal that I found in the middle of the ocean that I was snorkeling, and this guy just looked at me. He's like, "There's a seal below you," and I looked down and I just saw like a huge silhouette, like 50 feet down, just sleeping on the bottom. And then he just came up and was like swimming with us. It was very cool. Like I said, I recommend the trip. It's not a cheap place to go, that's for sure, but it's paradise, basically. Or at least like what you think is paradise in your mind, it's like paradise. And I know that if you live there, it probably gets boring, but if you visit, it's not. But I can't live there ever. You're not allowed to conceal carry there, and at all. Like, not even if some places, like not at all. That is kind of a priority for me. Eventually, and also, you cannot have snakes on the island. It is totally forbidden to have pet snakes, which literally makes it like impossible for me to ever want to move there. Like, you can't, there's no permits you can get or anything like that. They're just so worried that any snakes that escape will take over the island, like what happened with the brown tree snakes in Guam, which, if you don't know, brown tree snakes were on like ships and stuff, and they got to Guam. They basically killed every flightless native bird that only existed in Guam, and it really destroyed a lot of species. So they're petrified that will happen in Hawaii with snakes. And I get it. Like, islands are very weird because, you know, in Florida you have this tropical climate that everything can live in, so everything is feral, and you can find chameleons and iguanas and, you know, every kind of feral animal and non-native invasive plant is found in Florida. There is no native habitat left in Florida. So anybody that tries to say that we need to conserve the habitat in Florida, there's nothing native left. There's like some species left, but it's alligators living in canals. They're not, you know, the swamp is being turned into canals and neighborhoods. So, but because it's a big landmass, the animals that are not isolated on islands end up being able to deal with large predators and things like that. There is no large predators on Hawaii. There's no dangerous animals on Hawaii other than sharks in the ocean. There's nothing dangerous. So anything that gets introduced could decimate basically the birds. There really isn't much else, from what I can tell, that's native. Every reptile that we saw was invasive, but none of them are considered pests. So that's kind of nice. But it's nothing's native even there. Like the chameleons are from Tanzania in Africa. That chameleon that I showed you, they're originally from there. The geckos that we saw are from Madagascar. We saw brown anoles, which are another type of lizard that is from the Bahamas. Like nothing there that we saw was native. But it's just everything that gets introduced lives there. It's very weird to see like the invasive species impacts across the world. The only thing that is really bad everywhere it gets introduced, and it is in Hawaii, is cane toads. They get eaten by everything, and it kills everything that eats them because they are poisonous. So, but it was a great trip. I do want to talk about Stephen Wolfram a bit. We're going to talk more about him tomorrow. But he spoke a lot about things that we talk about on here, and I didn't know that he had gotten this far with some of this stuff. And he basically was talking about, I mean, an experiment that I want to do, and kind of gave legitimacy to the idea. It was the first time I heard anybody give legitimacy to the idea, which was pretty cool. I keep it kind of close to the chest right now, but I will publicly announce it. If you join our Discord, message me privately on Instagram, and I will tell you, because we discuss it in our group, if you stick around and I end up trusting you. But I don't talk about it on my streams right now. Maybe I did once, but I'm not going to right now. But I will do a whole stream on it. That's why it's not that I'm keeping it hidden. I'm going to announce it, and hopefully somebody does it. I don't even need to do it, but it's important that it is contextualized properly. But Stephen Wolfram gave legitimacy to the idea, and he also talked about God and physics and I mean, so many things, and we're going to look at clips more tomorrow, but we can touch on some of it today. He talked about how the randomness is probably impossible and doesn't exist, which that is obvious when you think about it long enough. Nothing can be random. Everything has a cause, and that cause is always a someone. But that is not what he said, but he said that randomness mathematically doesn't exist. But it doesn't seem like he's gotten to the point yet where, you know, everyone is a someone. But we're gonna look at how close he got, because it's pretty amazing. He said this, and he's talked about this before, but he went off on it this time, and he's totally right. But he's being metaphorical here, and he doesn't realize that his metaphor is true. He's talking about space-time, how space-time is a construct of the interactions and entanglement between, he calls them atoms of space. And atoms of space are consciousnesses. They are you and me. They are sentient singularities those are the atoms of space. He's talking about some structure that's smaller than a quark. I don't think that exists, to be honest, but it could be proven wrong. I think we are those structures that he's seeing in mathematics, that he's assuming are like subatomic particles of some type, beyond smaller than what our current, quarks are, even, which is, basically it's an elementary particle in the Standard Model, and it makes up hadrons, so it's very, very small. And but I don't think that there's anything smaller than quarks. I don't even think quarks are a singular object the way that we think of them. But here, these atoms of space that he's talking about are us.
This project is things about what is space, what is the universe made of. And ever since Euclid, people just sort of say space is just this thing where you can put things at any position you want, and they're just points, and they're just geometrical things that you can just arbitrarily put at different coordinate positions. Sort of the first thing in our physics project is the idea that space is made of something. Just like water is made of molecules, space is made of kind of atoms of space. And the only thing we can say about these atoms of space is they have some identity. It's this atom as opposed to this atom. And, you could give them, if you were a computer person, you give them UUIDs or something.
Separateness and oneness, and they have sovereignty, is what he's basically saying. Whether or not he would call it that or not.
Yes. But that's all there is to say about them, so to speak. And then all we know about these atoms of space is how they relate to each other. So we say these three atoms of space are associated with each other in some relation. So you can think about that as, what atom of space is friends with what other atom of space?
He's being metaphorical here, but he's right, literally right. He's not metaphorically correct. He's literally right. He just doesn't realize it yet.
You can build this essentially friend network of the atoms of space. And the sort of starting point of our physics project is that's what our universe is. It's a giant friend network of the atoms of space.
That is exactly true. But it is... the atoms of space are us, and cells, and atoms, and molecules, possibly hadrons, and also even universes, aeons, or cosmological verses, as I call them. Like, they are atoms of space. Literally, they're like the force. They're like the carrier particle of space. Essentially, they're just carrying space. They are the carrier particle of gravity as well. They are the graviton. We're inside of it. People are looking for gravitons thinking they're so small, but it's massive. You're in it. People are looking for atoms of space thinking that this is about something so small that we can't measure it, when in reality, it's us. It's like we can't see the forest through the trees. You will never find, I don't think, atoms of space smaller than quarks. We are those atoms of space. And when you realize this, it leads to all these potentialities of using atoms and instead of the way that we use them with nuclear fusion and fission, basically you might be able to use them for entangling with each other so that you can link one space with another, go warp or something like that, and also you could do all kinds of things with it. You could see far away, you could communicate on the other side of the universe in real time. You could teleport, essentially, which is like warp. There's lots of technological, I guess, abilities that are unlocked by this, if I'm right. And also, transmedium vehicles, like going through a liquid and the air, like going through water and the air, and without it basically impacting you, like these UAPs are doing. Like, they're taking advantage of entanglement properties of liquids versus gases, which are both just fluids in reality. And so this is all about entanglement. And if you're going to talk about this, and he's talking about this network of the atoms of space, if you look for something so small, you're never going to find it. And if you look for something so small for gravitons probably as well, you're never going to find them. They're just a force through the trees problem. You are the atoms of space. You are inside the graviton. It's much simpler than we have been trying to make it. And it's funny because he talks about this later on in his stream about how simple everything in his work is becoming. And his method seems to be kind of similar to mine in just, it doesn't look the same, but I've seen a couple of his models, and I mean, his branching hypergraphs are very similar to my entangled Excel tiles and cells. Like this one is, determined by that one, which is determined by that one. In my models, that is forming a web. It's just not, having lines drawn from one cell to the next. But if there's literally, if there is an entanglement relationship between one cell and another, then let me shut off my phone. If there's an entanglement relationship between one cell and another, then it's linked by like a string, essentially. So it is the same thing as his hypergraphs. It's just drawn differently. But he's right. I mean, that was brilliantly put. The universe is a network of the atoms of space. That's true. It is, but he goes way more and he's so close. Like, he talks about God even, and I'll show the clip where he basically says that physicists have always laughed at God, basically, and how it's looking like a lot of this spirituality is, or things that have been normally associated with spirituality are kind of coming into physics. And for anybody, it's so funny to watch the physics community scramble over its attempt to avoid consciousness being part of this and failing at every turn, because every single physics conversation at a high level ends up talking about consciousness. Every single one. It doesn't matter who's discussing it, even if it's Sean Carroll and he's just trying to avoid it, it still comes up. So it's just like, you can't run from the truth. That's all that means, really.
And so how can that possibly represent our universe? Well, it's like in something like water, there are molecules bouncing around, but on a large scale, that produces fluid flow, and we have fluid vortices, and we have all of these phenomena that are sort of the emergent phenomena from that underlying kind of collection of molecules bouncing around. Mm-hmm. And by the way, it's important that collection of molecules bouncing around have this phenomenon of computational irreducibility. That's actually what leads to the second law of thermodynamics, among other things. And that leads to the sort of randomness of the underlying behavior, which is what gives you something which on a large scale seems like it's a smooth, continuous type of thing. And so first thing is, space is made of something. It's made of all these atoms of space connected together in this network. And then everything that we experience is sort of features of that structure of space. So, when we have an electron or something, or a photon, it's some kind of tangle in the structure of space, much like kind of a vortex in a fluid would be just this thing that is, it can actually, the vortex can move around, it can involve different molecules in the fluid, but the vortex still stays there.
And if you zoom out enough, the vortex looks like an atom itself, like a basic element.
Yes.
So there's a level.
Exactly. It's amazing how close he's getting. It's really impressive. Wolfram impresses me, and I love that he's so excited about his work, and he doesn't care whether or not what people think about the fact that he's coming up with the answers, and he knows it, and he doesn't really care if it's offensive to people. Which is just jealousy, and I get it, but those people are just people that's a trait to be admired. I'm not saying nobody's an idol, but when you see somebody doing something bravely and they're enjoying it, and they're just going towards truth, and they're not really letting anything hamper them, it seems like Wolfram is doing that with this physics project, and it's very cool to see. When I first started this project, and not when I first started it, but after I had come out with all my models, I started looking at other people's work a little bit, and I realized everybody was coming to similar conclusions to me. And every time I saw that, I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, what's the value of everything I just did if they just are coming to the same conclusions? And that's not, I've definitely outgrown that and come to the realization that this is a process that we're all going through, and everybody's work is necessary and a stepping stone, and it's helped. But even Wolfram said on here, I think he said that there's many people with theories of consciousness, none of them interact with each other, and and the way that they discuss consciousness in their model is not compatible with other people's models because everybody's using different terms, basically, which is exactly what I said right before I left on my last stream before I went to on my honeymoon. So it's about having congruency and cohesiveness in our language, and that means we have to, like, you know, admit that everybody's got lots of stuff to add to this. But it's been very cool to see his project. It's very crowdsourced. He's got like lots of people involved in it, and I don't know. It's the way that he's doing it is. It's the way that a theory of everything partially has to be done, especially when it comes to bridging these super objective structures that are beyond calculation or beyond computation even, and they are then need to be linked to like subjective mathematics, which people think math is objective, but it's not. It's subjective. You have to link this kind of super objective or super literal math, or meta mathematics as he calls it, with normal mathematics. So you need to somehow link y is 0 equal to 1 and infinity at the same time in meta mathematics, and equal to nothing or placeholder in subjective mathematics, equal to an empty set and a placeholder, essentially. So the rules change, and you have to figure out how to bridge that. And I think that Wolfram's work is very valuable for that. He created Wolfram Alpha, and that's probably the #1 tool of people involved in math these days, from what I've seen. Then you need that level of like mathematical access and ability in order to link this math that is, honestly, it's so simple that it's complex. The equation of everything is 0 is equal to 1. Like, that is basically that, and it's not nothing is equal to everything. It's infinity it's infinite oneness. That's what that means. 0 essentially means infinite oneness, but there's a dualistic aspect to looking at it. And he talks about this in terms of consciousness on this, and I'm going to play a clip about it, but he's basically saying that he never wanted to get into the consciousness discussion, but he can't avoid it. And he actually thinks that his work will be very applicable to that field. I agree with him. It's like I said, it's just, you can't run from the truth. And to see physicists embracing this and being like, yeah, this is going to be useful in consciousness, and it's going to be applicable to, the study of consciousness. That is more than just vaguely discussing consciousness, but then also shunning it as being primary to the discussion, I guess. And he's not there yet, but where he's saying it's primary to the discussion, but I don't think he doesn't seem opposed to it or like he's avoiding it. He's just going to truth. That's what you have to seek if you want to find out the truth, is you have to seek the truth. Don't seek God. Don't seek... you can seek whether or not God is true by, if you believe in God already, assume the opposite is true and look for evidence that God doesn't exist. But like logical evidence, not just like, oh, people suffer. That's not... suffering is necessary to making sentient sovereign beings. And it's just an intrinsic aspect of consciousness. So, and it's intrinsic to meaning. So it's not a bad thing. It's just, we just don't like it. And then there's so many aspects to this that are being linked to physics, and Wolfram is going towards it honestly, which is good. Like, very few people do that. But if you don't see God, my point was, if you don't see God and you want to know if God exists, assume God is true and then look for logical evidence of it. But if you do believe in God and you want to test whether or not it's true, assume God is not true and think about what the logical implications of that would be on the world, how the world works. If you do that long enough, my conclusion personally is that none of us would exist. And that's it seems like a logical inevitability, but it's also, and I recognize that it's a very inconvenient logical inevitability if somebody asks you, like, how would you falsify the existence of God? And you're like, well, none of us would exist. I understand why people would say that's a cop-out, but it's not. It does appear to be a logical inevitability. Why it doesn't seem possible that consciousness comes from unconsciousness. And it doesn't even seem possible that unconsciousness can exist objectively as the primary structure of existence, because you need informational cohesion and to even have information. So you need a system that interprets information and in order to even have information, which means it needs to be self-referencing, and that will inevitably create a mind that's sentient. But speaking of sentient, I've discussed on here before, sentient means feeling, and self-aware and feeling. It's the emphasis on feeling of consciousness, whereas consciousness is kind of this vague term of like thinking and feeling and self-aware, or aware of something. You're conscious of heat, maybe, but it doesn't necessarily imply self-awareness. It's just not well defined. Sentient means self-aware and feeling. It's much more specific. And Wolfram said this about consciousness. And I thought this was very cool. He's right again.
That there's sort of a feeling that we exist in some way, that we have this intrinsic feeling about ourselves. You know, I suspect that any of these things would also have an intrinsic feeling about themselves. I've been sort of trying to think recently about constructing an experiment about what if you were just a piece of a cellular automaton, let's say. You know, what would your feeling about yourself actually be? And, you know, can we put ourselves in the shoes, in the cells of the cellular automaton, so to speak? Can we get ourselves close enough to that we could have a sense of what the world would be like if you were operating in that way? And it's a little difficult because, you know, you have to not only think about what are you perceiving, but also what's actually going on in your brain. And our brains do what they actually do. And they don't, it's, you know, I think there might be some experiments that are possible with you know, neural nets and so on, where you can have something where you can at least see in detail what's happening inside the system. And I've been sort of one of my projects to think about is there a way of kind of getting a sense kind of from inside the system about what its view of the world is and how it you know, can we make a bridge? See, the main issue is this, where you know, it's a sort of philosophically difficult thing, because it's like we do what we do. We understand ourselves, at least to some extent.
We humans understand ourselves.
That's correct. Okay. But yet, okay, so what are we trying to do? For example, when we are trying to make a model of physics, what are we actually trying to do? Because, you know, you say, well, can we work out what the universe does? Well, of course we can. We just watch the universe. The universe does what it does. But what we're trying to do when we make a model of physics is we're trying to get to the point where we can tell a story to ourselves that we understand that is also a representation of what the universe does.
How convenient and simple is it that you're inside a mind with feelings just like you? The same feelings. Every single sentient being has the same feelings. There's not... People will even say things in the biological community, the biology community. They'll say things like, reptiles they don't have the feelings that we have because they don't have this part of their brain as developed as mammals. So they just don't have the same level of awareness and life, I guess, and thinking, or not saying that they have an IQ like us or anything. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they think they don't form relationships. They don't have friends. They don't have enemies or romantic relationships. I mean that 100%. Why would we have romantic relationships and other species not have romantic relationships? Atoms have romantic relationships. Hadrons appear to have romantic relationships. Molecular bonds are bonds. There's so much symmetry in even how we use words, and we don't even realize that we're using words the same way in one instance as we are in another instance, but we are, or we could at least, but we're not. So we'll say, this is chemistry. You guys have a lot of chemistry between you guys, like some couple. Or you'll be like, I don't know, like the strong nuclear force holds atoms together. And then we'll be like, oh, the nuclear family is the objective societal unit. And the atom is the unit, the objective, elemental unit, essentially, basically. And then we're using nuclear in the same exact instance, just on different scales, but we have separated them and been like, nuclear over here doesn't mean, nuclear family doesn't mean the same thing as a nucleus of an atom. It's not really the same. It just kind of means like center. No, it means exactly the same. Their interactions chemistry is about basically observable interactions. There's interactions on levels below that as well, obviously, but otherwise, how would you get different elements? But if you get into molecules and you get into chemicals and chemistry and compounds and things like that, more complex assemblies, there's still interactions. And then you go above that and there's cellular interactions. And you go above that and there's obviously organism interactions, and we know that from firsthand experience, and we can also observe it on our plane, essentially. And there's also caste interactions and familial interactions, or genealogical interactions, then caste interactions, and then there is probably universal interactions. But it's guaranteed that there's universal interactions, but we can't even perceive those because you're inside the universe, so it's outside your view. But it is possible to logically deduce it, basically, that you're inside a being that's reproducing just like you, just like cells, just like atoms exist in a lineage structure. It's just a little different, but it's still there. I mean, to go from hydrogen to gold is a lineage structure, and it is an adaptation process that atoms are going through inside of their conditions, which are inside of a star. And when pressure increases to a certain level, they evolve. They literally evolve. And in how they interact and the structures that they form, they have to evolve. It's literally like, it's the same exact thing that happens with organisms. It's a combination of sexual sexual selection and also environmental selection, because you have the conditions of the star, and also that is causing the relationships to change between hadrons to form new elements. And those relationships between hadrons are literally social interactions, basically, I believe. If hadrons are sentient beings, atoms are definitely sentient beings. Hadrons are probably sentient beings. If they don't, then they mimic the same structures. And if they're not, then they're the hands of the sentient being, the universe, or God. But they are So they are a sentient being no matter what, but it's just, are they the hands of a sentient being with the quarks being the fingers, or are they actually sovereign themselves, like an atom? And I'm not entirely sure, because they definitely mimic the structure. But it's absolutely amazing to see when you realize that there's only one pattern. I mean, that is what the theory of everything is, or theory of everyone. There's only one pattern. And if space is a network of friend relationships between the atoms of space, and conscious sentient beings are the atoms of space, then like it's literally all about social interactions. It means this has so many implications. Wolfram was talking about this. He said it appears that the structures of physics, and I mean, this isn't news to me, but for him to say it is cool, are not just probably going to be the patterns of physics. They're also going to be the patterns of economics and sociology and all these other things. And he's right. I'm going to play that clip in a minute. And also was listening to Kurtjai Mungal talk to Jordan Peterson and God Saad and a couple other people that I'm not familiar with. And it was a great conversation. I'll play a clip from that as well. And they were talking about this same type of thing but Kurt was saying that sociology is hard. Physics is easy, sociology is hard. And the reality is that, and they all agreed with him, and I understand why this seems to be the case, but it's actually that they're both following the same exact pattern. The patterns of the Standard Model in physics are the exact same patterns of chemistry and biology and genealogy and sociology and morality. So they're not, one is not more complicated than the other. Sometimes it's harder to see the pattern of one level in the periodicity of sentience, or the stages of sentience, than it is to see it in another, because of just where your position is when you look at it. So for us, it's hard to see that atoms are undergoing an evolutionary process because of the way that we observe quantum mechanics at the level that it happens. You start to see what consciousness does instead of a physically observable object all the time. That's why when you sometimes an electron appears like wave, and sometimes it appears like a particle and stuff like that. It's because you're seeing what it's doing. You're not really seeing more so than you're seeing it. And it's, whereas us on our plane, if we look at a cell, or we look at another organism, it's easy for us to say that is one organism, that's Tom and that's Jerry, and it's easy for us to tell the difference. But if you're looking on subatomic levels, it starts to look complicated from our perspective, but it's not. And same thing up. If you're trying to see where's the singularity in genealogy, you can't, because it's a lineage that you're part of. So it's a forest through the trees problem. You can't, past a certain point above you, you can't see very easily, and past a certain point below you, you also can't see very easily. But the pattern remains the same. And so it's just complicated to see it. It's not actually complicated to understand it. It's just complicated to realize that you can understand atoms by looking at men and women, and you can understand protons and neutrons, but it's hard to go the opposite direction because of our perspective. Everything is about perspective. It's just about where we're situated is making it more difficult to see certain stages or certain levels in the periodicity of life. But check this out. This I highly recommend this. This was October 26, 2021. I have not gone through all of this interview with Wolfram and Lex Fridman yet. it is the best interview of Wolfram I've seen so far, in every interview with Wolfram that I've watched, which isn't many, but because they're so long, but every single one is great. This is the best one. It's the most recent one, and it's cool to see his progression of, I saw one stream he did in the past. He said the universe appears to be intelligent, but it doesn't appear to be conscious. And now he's kind of starting to, talk about how spirituality, or the ideas and concepts that are discussed in spirituality, are looking like they're much more relevant to physics than we thought in the past and the recent past. And also how consciousness is much more of an aspect of the universe that you have to contend with. They're seeing the evolution of this project that he's working on in front of everybody, as opposed to, like, I don't know, geometric unity, where it's just like worked on, by Eric Weinstein, and then he just releases it. And obviously there's work that needs to be done with it, but he came out with the idea. It's not like this is a project publicly that is this, like, not crowdfunding, but crowdsourced project where Wolfram just streams all day long and has all these people working on various projects related to the Wolfram Physics Project. It's definitely the way to go about there's two sides of the theory of everything. There has to be a head, and there has to be body, which is an assembly. This is the body structure, where it's like crowd sourced. It's multiplicity. It's many, but you also have to have one. So you have many in the one. The head and the tails, body and mind. That's true of the theory of everything, or every one, because the theory has to structurally be aligned with the pattern that it describes. It's just an inevitability. So there's going to be a dualistic aspect observed in how this manifests, but it will end at a singularity of mind. It just will, inevitably. So, but you saw Wolfram said consciousness is a feeling. That is that's an aspect of sentience, is feeling. Consciousness is a feeling. And this is Kurt and Jordan Peterson discussing the cosmos being difficult to understand. And this is what I was talking about, where, like, certain levels of this are difficult to see, but it's not actually difficult to understand once you realize that it's the same pattern.
Obstacles that make us innately predisposed to hate evolutionary psychology. So this is sort of a meta explanation, right? There is an adaptive.
There's that word meta.
Why we despise adaptive explanations, right? So I'll just mention, a few. For example, we're very, very bad. And so I'm going to borrow a concept from Richard Dawkins, who talks about middle world, right? So it's very hard for our human brain to understand something at the cosmological level. It just seems too wacky. And I mean, I try to watch sometimes all these physics shows, and, I'm lost by the third sentence, right? Not because I'm incapable of complex thought, but because it's hard to try to understand things at this cosmological scale. You put things at the nanoscales, it's very difficult for the human brain to understand. So that's why we've evolved, as Richard Dawkins says, to understand things at middle world.
This is exactly what I'm saying. He said it actually better than I even thought. It's difficult for us to see beyond us, and it's difficult for us to see it on the cosmological level, the universal level, the genealogical level. It's easy for us to see castes. It's easy for us to see even nations, which is like the next level up, which objective nation is basically the world. It's like the one world government is inevitable, guys. That doesn't mean that it is good and should be pursued actively, or that it will be bad inevitably. I believe we will go through Revelation, which is bad and then good. So, but it's just inevitable. A singularity is inevitable, always, in everything. It is inevitable. Every song ends on a single note. Every single universe ends as a singularity, and you ultimately are a singularity, and the ultimate nature of existence itself, all that exists, is that it is also a singularity, which means it is a singularity of sentience, if sentient beings are the objective structures of existence, which they are. It always will end in a singularity. And that's, if you say to people like, yeah, every song ends in a single note, people will be like, well, yeah, obviously that just sounds nice, but it's not really relevant. Yes, it's very relevant. What is super literally true is the things that are so simple that we disregard them currently because they're not complex enough. Like that idea, or like the idea that, you can't falsify that which is everywhere, so maybe because you can't falsify God or consciousness, maybe that means that it is inevitably true that God and consciousness are true and exist, or true aspects of existence. And we look at it and we want it to be more complicated than it is, and we're like, well, you can't falsify it, so until you can figure out how to falsify something that is literally inescapable, I'm gonna disregard it as, not serious. It's like, no, some of these things are so simple that we are the ones that are overcomplicating it, because we exist in, as God said, this middle world that Richard Dawkins said that, which is, even Richard Dawkins says things that are smart sometimes. It's very rare. But it's not very rare. But it just, it's pretty rare. He just focuses outside of even his original passion and niche. He became the anti-God guy instead of the evolution guy. And they're not mutually exclusive ideas, but they've been framed that way, and it caused people to feel like they had to make a choice. But and if you love evolution, then, and you think that is antithetical to the idea of God, then you will end up hating God and devoting if you love evolution enough to devote your life to it, you will also devote your life inevitably to, fighting that which you view as a threat to that which you love, which is if you love evolution and you think God is a threat to it, you will hate God. Hatred comes from love. You can't hate something unless you view it as a threat to that which you love. They're not opposites. There is no opposite to love. It's just indifference, which is really equivalent to nothingness, which doesn't exist. Indifference is not a feeling. It is a non-feeling. And that means it doesn't exist actually. And that means that literally there is no opposite to love. So when people say, oh, the universe is all love, it's literally inevitable that ends up being the case. And it's also inevitable that the universe includes hatred, because it is inevitably all love. Like if you love your brother, you will hate, him being a heroin addict. Like you hate that which you view as a threat to that which you love. That's the only thing that causes you to hate, is love. People in the social world who try and make this this is an ideology of love and this is an ideology of hate. There is no ideologies of hate that are not also ideologies of love. There is no ideology of love that is not also associated with aspects of hate. But in this this discussion with Kurt and Godsad and Jordan Peterson, also Jay Fiamengo, I don't know that person, M. Rechtenwald and BK, I don't know who these people are, but they were all very intelligent. Everybody in this was making some serious points about a lot of things involving gender specifically. and bravely, I will admit, much more bravely than any other conversation I've ever seen. So I do recommend this discussion. I'm not going to get into it right now, but if you're part of our Discord, then you know I talk about this a lot, and they talk about it very blatantly in here, how our gender dynamics are so screwed up, and it's being manifested and labeled as political and racial and, economic, and those are effects of the cause that is the gender dynamics being messed up. And they called it out on here as the first time I've ever seen anybody be so blatant about it. Definitely recommend this this stream right here. It's on Safs McGill's channel. That's it. Fascinating discussion. But they talk about how, sociology and physics are all linked, but so does Wolfram, and I was hoping that I saved it. But I don't think that I did, the clip. I'll touch on it tomorrow, I'll find it. But basically what Wolfram said is that it appears that the same patterns of physics are going to be the patterns of economics, which means that they're the pattern of politics as well, and everything, because they're also the patterns of social interactions. Economics is one of those, it's like physics. It's like everything is physics if you want it to be, and everything is economics if you want it to be, and everything is philosophy. There are certain words that we just kind of use, we can apply to everything. And in economics is definitely one of them. I mean, you can use economic concepts, the same exact concepts taught in economics, and I know this because I was a finance major, and apply it to, and I started as a biology major, so I also know this. And I don't need to be a major in any of these things to know this, but it is taught officially in, the curriculum. You can apply the same ideas of economics to metabolism. I mean, it's the same thing. You're just dealing with resources. And energy, and which is, information, which eventually will lead you to philosophy and things. But if you're going to think about things in terms of energy, you're going to be able to use economic concepts across the board on every level. And that's also true of, a lot of the concepts that we discuss in biology, like metabolism and things like that, because it's easy to see it on the biological level, in the periodicity of consciousness, or this, I guess, the periodicity of consciousness. The periodicity of consciousness is 8 levels in my models, and the stages of sentience is those same levels, but then reduced to 4. But it doesn't really, it's just simplifying information. You're just zipping a file, essentially. It's still the same structure, and it's models the universe, essentially, is that you have 4 primary perspectives to every mind, but then there's also minds within a mind. That is inevitable because you and me are talking right now, or you're listening to me talk right now, and we're inside the universe, which means we're inside of a mind. That means that there is a dual aspect to mind always, and you can see this also going down. You look at cells compared to organisms. You look at the cosmos compared to, humans. It's just this dualistic perspective always. And, but I mean, the pattern remains the same, and you can apply these concepts that are taught in certain fields that are applicable everywhere, including economics, and certain aspects of biology, like sexual selection and evolutionary pressures or environmental pressures. These concepts are universal. They're applicable to atoms. They are applicable to chemicals and chemistry and molecules and chemistry. They're applicable in politics and morality and sociology. It's the same exact patterns everywhere. I mean, supply and demand is something that we just call metabolism on the biological scale. Had a California king when I lived there. He escaped once for a few days. Florida is the Indonesia of America. Yeah, it is. I once found a blue-faced green anole in Hawaii. I let it go because I thought it was sad. You should have kept that. That sucks. But I get it. People have found cooler things than that. Is very cool. But and to let them go. Once I found a striped long-nosed snake, which for those who don't know, long-nosed snakes are banded naturally. But I found one that was genetically striped. It was amazing. Had perfect stripe going down its entire body. I caught it. It was the biggest long-nosed snake I had ever seen. I let it go. I caught it again like a few nights later. I let it go again, and I thought about keeping it. And then 2 nights later, I saw someone ran it over, and I should have kept it. And like that would have been a cool gene to like bring into the hobby. Welcome back, bro. Hope you had a good trip. I had a great trip. I'm gonna be talking to you about this, Ethan. I got a ukulele. I will be learning music and taking you guys with me on that journey. I really think that this is the right instrument. It's funny because it wasn't cheap. It was like $200. And I never thought I would spend $200 on an instrument. Like, I didn't even want to spend $200 on a keyboard, and I figured that I eventually would. But I've tried to learn piano, and honestly, it's a little overwhelming for me. I tried to learn oboe. It was a little overwhelming for me. I tried to learn guitar. It was overwhelming for me. I know what happens is I focus on trying to sound cool instead of trying to let feeling flow through me, basically. And that makes you not sound cool. It's the same as when you try and look cool when you dance and then you don't look cool. But, you know, if you're fighting in martial arts doing the same moves, you'll have amazing rhythm if you're me and you think about fighting. But if you think about dancing and you're doing the same moves, you'll lose all your rhythm because you're trying to look cool. Whereas when you're fighting, you're not trying to look cool. But ukulele is something I always wanted to learn. And then I had a roommate in college that could play pretty much any instrument. And he told me that this was actually harder than guitar and piano. And I know music people will say that, but I'm not wired the same way as somebody who's naturally musical. So it never really worked for me. But I think that this is going to be good because it starts with 4 strings, and I think that that's very easily linkable to my physics work. I've been trying to link this music to my physics work, and I can see the patterns there in notes and things, but I can't experience it. I can just look at the different notes that exist, and I can look at, you know, just how music is even written, and I can see the quantities of the lines versus the spaces. And I mean, it's 4 spaces and 5 lines, I think, and that's 9. And there's lots of quantity symmetries there in music. Obviously, I think that music is the objective language. If sentience is primary, that means that feeling is primary. And the thing about music is you can take a song that somebody's never heard, bring it to an island that's never seen any outsiders for, you know, thousands of years, play that song for them, and they will have the same emotion, probably, that you have if from that same song. Everybody knows what songs sound angry. Everybody knows what songs sound sad, what songs sound happy. It's a universal language. And that makes it like basically like the theory of every one but the communication form. But I have not been able to like experience it. I can just look at it, and that's not enough. You have to be able to experience these things if you really want to understand them. It's why it's so easy for me to understand physics, because I look at my own interactions with women and my interactions with them as a man and my desires and feelings, and then I apply it to a hadron, and it just ends up being that I can make a prediction of what's already been, you know, observed in physics. because I am understanding it from a first-hand perspective. I can't do that with music yet. I'm not good enough. But I was picking it up much quicker than I've ever picked up any other instrument. I'm giving my friend back her guitar this week, and I'm going to learn this instead. I think it's going to be much less overwhelming for me. Like, if people are naturally good at music or telling you to do something one way and you're not naturally good at music and it keeps failing you for like 20 years of trying, and it's been like 20 years of me trying, it's probably wise to just literally do the opposite at that point and try and, I don't know, not just learn piano and guitar, even though I recognize that for people who are naturally gifted at music, those do seem to be like the universal instruments that everybody goes to. And I get it, but it just doesn't work with my mind. Have you ever had an actual teacher? I had an actual teacher with oboe, and I did not have an actual teacher, but I was watching lots of YouTube videos and things like that. I know it's not the same, but I can pick up other things from YouTube videos better than I can pick up music. I know that you will pick it up much, much better if you have an actual teacher, but I can teach myself martial arts on YouTube videos, and then I would go and practice in the gym with other people, but I could teach myself moves, and I could see how the interactions worked, and I could just feel it, and I can't feel it with music when I'm playing music. Because my goals in the past have been, I wasn't interested in guitar and I wasn't interested in piano. I just like the way, it sounds when people play music on an instrument. So I wanted to be able to do it. I've always liked ukulele. I was just always persuaded not to pick it up. I thought it would be like simple for me, but I was always told not to do it and to learn guitar first. So I tried, and it just kept failing every time. I played oboe in elementary school, and I was so bad at it. I did have a teacher, like a real teacher, and she actually ended up passing away, which is unfortunate. But I was so bad at it, though, that I remember just being in our like recital or a concert or whatever, and I just faked it. And luckily, there was someone else there that was good at oboe and could still play, and so I just pretended. And I did try and practice. I just couldn't resonate with it. But that's true of dance for me too, and painting. I remember like once I was in an art class in high school, and we had this bowl of fruit in the center of the table, and we were told to paint the fruit, and I started painting the fruit, and the art teacher comes over to me and she goes, "Do those grapes that you just painted, do they look like what you think grapes look like, or do they look like what the grapes look like in the center of the table?" And she made a great point. I'll never forget it. And I realized I was just like, oh, grapes, circles. And I was just like drawing that instead of looking at what I was seeing and translating what I was seeing into what I was creating, which is what you do with music. What you feel is then translated into a different medium. I wasn't translating. I was like, grapes, circles. And it's interesting that all of these things that I have struggled with are things that they're literally just art. They're not like, they don't have this other purpose to them that is the main purpose. Like the main purpose of martial arts is not for it to be artistic, even though it can be also beautiful and artistic. Its main purpose is not to be artistic. It's, combat. With dancing and music, or playing instruments, the purpose is to create beauty always. And same thing with painting. I've always struggled with creating beauty when I was trying to create beauty, but my martial arts rhythm is great. And I do like, some people look good when they do martial arts and when they fight. I am one of those people who I have rhythm when I shoot, I have rhythm when I fight, and it's just natural. But I'm not trying to be, to bring, rhythm and beauty into the world. I'm just trying to, accomplish the goal. But it ends up being that it brings rhythm and beauty. But if I try and bring rhythm and beauty, I fail. It's just weird. And I think there's just like two types of mindsets. And I saw it in martial arts. I saw everybody that liked martial arts movies, which I wasn't really a martial arts movie guy. They would come into our martial arts schools that I studied at over the years, and they always had no rhythm in their fighting, and they struggled with it really badly. And I realized they were doing it because they liked the way it looked on TV, and they were trying to, like, to them it was a dance, and they were failing. But they were probably really good dancers, and whereas I couldn't dance, but I could do martial arts. To them, it wasn't actually about a fight. It was about, you know, how am I being perceived by others? And when I paint, and when I've been playing music in the past with instruments that didn't call to me, I guess, and also dancing, which I have to be like pretty drunk, and I don't drink pretty much at all anymore, so it's just like doesn't happen. But last time I actually danced without caring what people thought of how I looked. I was in Vegas. Okay, like that's many years ago in college. So that is it's not a natural state for me to just dance and be. I'm too focused on, does this look good? If I paint something, I'm like too focused on it. Does this look good? If I'm trying to learn an instrument, I'm too focused on, does this sound good? Instead of just like playing. And that will hinder you. That's very much. It's what I think is the cause of like autistic tendencies, is you're just focused on how you look socially, and it's making you socially awkward. But when you don't care, then you can not be awkward. But if you are conscious of, oh, how's that person perceiving me? Do I look like I'm confident right now? Am I saying the right thing? You're going to end up being super awkward. That's what happens to me with all things that are, the purpose is beauty. I was okay at sculpture always, but for me, it was because I wasn't focused on, do people like the way it looks? I just like building things, and I do have like an aesthetic skill kind of. I built cages over there with trim, and I'm a photographer. That's my one art that I can do, but photography is different than every other art because you're not it's not as creative as like painting or playing music. It's more about, do you know what looks good and can you just capture that, versus are you able to generate something that looks good or sounds good. It's just a different type of art, and it is the only art that has come naturally to me in my life was photography. And it is also the only one that is totally different than the rest. Perspective is everything. It impacts your abilities more than IQ, more than, literally anything. There's nothing that matters more to how you are able to function than your perspective. We're going to realize that perspective will allow like warp speed and stuff like that soon too. So, it is the most powerful force in the universe because it is the most objective functions of the universe, because you're inside a sentient being. So it has perspectives. You are a sentient being. You have perspectives. Space-time emerges from those things. You change your perspective, you literally can change space-time. I'm not telling you I know how to do that, just telling you it will do it. And in certain instances, and if you entangle certain elements, molecules or atoms together, particles, maybe that's how you do warp speed. And that is what you're doing, is you're changing the perspective of those particles that you're entangling. They're now able to sense each other and perceive each other. If you take a domino and you put it next to another domino and you push on one domino and it hits the other domino, they're now entangled and they can perceive each other. Essentially, it's a metaphor, but it works because they are able to sense each other. if you separate them and they're not entangled and you knock one over and it doesn't end up hitting the other, then there's no perspective of one that one has of the other. The only perspective that you can have is if one hits the other, because it's a domino and it's a metaphor. But it does work, and we're going to be able to do this with atoms and molecules and who knows, cells and organisms and things like that probably too. Even it's just going to be probably harder to think about how you would do that, but it's probably actually simpler because we naturally do it. It's like, how do you entangle with another organism? I don't know. Get married to them, have kids, form a family. You are now entangled completely. So you can entangle particles on the organism level. We do it naturally. We just don't think about it as quantum entanglement, but it is absolutely quantum entanglement. And there's probably more interesting ways to do it too that maybe aren't done naturally by us, at least currently, but I'm not sure. But I mean, perspective is everything, and it will absolutely allow you maybe to do warp speed and also turn you into, you know, someone who is a musical idiot into a musical genius maybe, or physics and math idiot into a physics genius, essentially. Or allow you to perceive genius ideas in physics and have genius moments of you know, artistic abilities if you change your perspective. And I've known that I've needed to do this with music for a while, but I've not known how to do it. And I realized I have no interest in the musical instruments that I've been trying to learn. I mean, not that much, but I have always wanted to play the ukulele for some odd reason. I think it's because it just looks so simple. But I got a case, and I paid like $200. Paulina bought half of this. I bought half. It was like $250, which is pretty expensive. Like, I know you can get like $50 ukuleles, but I told Paulina, I was like, if I get a $50 ukulele, I'm not going to play it. Oh, I'm not as likely to play it and be committed. But if I get a $250 ukulele, I am definitely going to commit to learning to do that. That is like, I don't drop that kind of money on something I don't intend to use. So sometimes you have to, in order to invest in something, you have to invest in it, which means you have to like sacrifice. Like a ring for your fiance, like an engagement ring, should be something that takes an investment. It doesn't mean it has to take even a monetary investment. Maybe you inherit a diamond. Maybe you have lots of money already to begin with. But you should invest time in creating something then at that point that you worked on, that you didn't just like purchase it, you know, as you're walking by one in Costco and without a second thought. The point of that act of presenting an engagement ring is that it has to be a sacrifice of some type. It has to be an investment of energy and really, which is, you know, translates to time and economic resources and focus and all kinds of things. But it just has to be an investment. That's also true of things that you want to get good at in any kind of skill. You have to put an investment into it. Speaking of rings, I was looking at black zirconium for my wedding band. Very cool. There is like more wedding band options for men now than there is women. It was mind-blowing and a little overwhelming to see, but I kind of knew what I wanted already. I just wanted like, mine is it's just 14 karat gold and it's hammered finish, and it's pretty simple. I like the organic look of it, but what's nice about like these like zirconium, I think, and like ceramics and things like that, is that if it gets caught in a piece of machinery, this will bend and not be good for your finger probably, but like a ceramic type of ring will snap, which is safer for your finger. And as a man, I'm constantly having to take this off even to do certain things, if I'm building something or if I'm practicing shooting or doing martial arts or something like that, I have to take this off sometimes. And, you know, if you're a man that does things with their hands, then be conscious of that when you're getting a wedding band, that you get something safe. You don't end up like Jimmy Fallon degloving your finger. But this thing is so loose now because I got it loosened, and that it's probably cannot deglove my finger. And it was so sharp and it was too tight. It was so sharp when I got it. I was putting it on and I could not get it off for a while. And then I would have to run it under cold water. And then I got bit by that snake on this stream once when I was showing some snakes, and I got bit by that tiny hognose snake on here. You can go watch the video if you haven't seen it. I think the thumbnail is me with a little tiny red and black snake hanging off my finger. That's a venomous snake, and it was probably the most painful snake bite I've ever had, even though it was the smallest snake I've ever been bit by. Probably. It created a calcium deposit on my finger, that bite, and I could not use my ring, and I had to get my ring resized because of that snake bite. It's very odd. Like, look at that. Isn't that weird? It'll go away. It's like when you break your finger and you get a bump, and then over years it goes away. That bite did that to me. You can see it right here. Versus it's much less here on that side. It was crazy. Look at that. I'm not exaggerating. It's supposed to be a harmless snake, but I mean, it definitely made it so I had to get my wedding ring resized. Little bastard. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this, learning this ukulele. I got a tuner and everything. I feel like I invested in an instrument for the first time in my life. Like, I got all the gear, not just like $50 ukulele and that's it. It's like I got the case, I got a tuner, I picked up like some cards and things that help you learn, you know, various aspects of it. What are the various chords and things like that. So I've been practicing the past couple days a bit. I really like it. I'm not planning on becoming like an expert ukulele player or anything like that, but if I can play well enough to just be able to enjoy listening to my own music that I'm playing, that is as good as I ever need to be at music. And it's just something I've always wanted to do. Happy to help you figure it out however I can. I will definitely ask for your help. I'm sure of it. I don't know how yet, but I'm sure that I will ask for it. We have our streams every Thursday at 7 p.m. in the Discord. We talk about everything in there, and we have people in there who have very skilled in music, and we have philosophers in there, and who are, you know, getting their PhD in philosophy and are very, very skilled in it. We have music teachers in there. We have people who are, you know, biology experts in there. That we have all kinds of people in that group. And if you're listening to this and you're not part of it, message me on Instagram if you'd like to join our weekly discussions. They are always a good time. We're going to have them again this Thursday at 7 p.m. We're back to the normal schedule, so I'll be here again tomorrow at 6:30. I'm not getting off yet. I'm going to leave here at about 8:40. But I'm just letting you guys know that we're back to the normal schedule. My sleep schedule is not back to the normal schedule. I did not adjust to Hawaii's sleep schedule at all. And then I came back here and I'm all messed up from jet lag and everything. We're going to watch this sunrise again that I filmed. Hopefully not get censored by Disney. I'll keep it low, but here you go. Go to Hawaii. I recommend it if you can one day. You know, The Lion King has a song in it that is probably one of my favorite songs, like spiritual songs in existence. And it's funny how we don't think about that movie as like a religious movie in any way, but it the song "He Lives in You" or "They Live in You." There's two different ones. One is the head, "He lives in you." The other is the body, "They live in you." The one and the many. They both that song is so super literally true and amazing. When you think about that song as a song about God and you listen to it, it takes on a whole new meaning. And then when you realize that there's two different versions, "They live in you," which is multiplicity, and "He lives in you," singularity, it's amazing how much that song is it speaks to our soul on a level that you don't even realize, and it becomes a cultural icon among anti-theists, even though it is a song essentially about like God. And I mean, you can say, oh, it's about, you know, his ancestors or whatever, but like it's about the universal structure of consciousness, which is God. And if you think about it from that perspective, it's very deep and like I guess just impactful, spiritually impactful. I love that song. But there's a lot of things that like slide by us, especially when if you're not thinking about God actively. Like I was watching the movie Signs with Paulina on Halloween. We don't do anything for Halloween, but usually we don't like celebrate it or anything like that. And but I was like, okay, it's Halloween, we're gonna watch a scary movie, the scariest movie to me that exists, which is Signs. But Signs is a great movie because it leaves you with a good feeling. It's very, very scary. There's no violence, and it also has like very humorous aspects parts thrown in. And the movie is called Signs, and everybody who is not thinking about it from the perspective of God, of, you know, approaching it spiritually, they think that signs means the crop circles that these aliens are making, and they think the movie is about aliens. But the aliens are actually the secondary story of the movie. Signs is a reference to signs of miracles in this whole speech that is given by the main character. And he's like, oh, there's two people in the world, people who perceive everything as random and lucky, and then people or unlucky. And he said there's another group that perceives everything as having meaning and having a reason behind it, and all, you know, sees things as signs of miracles. And that is what that's actually like the main reference to. There's two sides of it, obviously, but it's funny how you can look at one movie and see it as having its main plot be about aliens, and then look at it again and see it being kind of a horror, and then you look at it from a different perspective and you realize that it's even more fundamentally about spirituality and God and faith, and not actually a horror movie. It's like a beautiful spiritual movie, and it's a movie that has like two sides to it, and you only see one. Especially if you are an anti-theist, you only see one. You can see both if you are a theist, I think. But if you're looking at it from an anti-theist perspective or an atheist perspective, you're just going to be like, that movie's a horror movie about aliens. But it's actually a drama about God, and it actually is, I'm pretty sure, listed as a drama, because I tried to rent it once, and this was when Blockbuster was still in business, and I was like, you guys don't have Signs? And they were like, no, we have it. And I was like, I just looked, I don't see it. And I was like, I looked right over there, and I pointed to the horror, and they're like, it's not a horror movie, it's a drama. And I did not know why it was listed as a drama until, I don't even know, 20 years later, when I had to like realization of God. And I was like, oh, this is actually a movie about God and faith, but it has like an alien side story that gives the, the motivation to the rest of the story, basically. But it's not about that. It's about faith. But even the word signs has two sides to it. It's an amazing movie. If you have not seen it, highly recommend it. It's very relevant to the fact that our physics is starting to realize God a little bit, and also is now realizing the existence of extraterrestrials. It's funny, I was thinking about that word extraterrestrial. An extraterrestrial means outside of Earth. It doesn't mean off Earth, like we think of like solar system, other planets, things like that. It means outside of Earth. And the four primary perspectives in sentient singularity theory are inside, outside, separate, and oneness. So the opposite of an extraterrestrial would be like an intraterrestrial. But it's interesting that that word is actually probably more accurate to describing what these beings probably are, because I think they came from a previous aeon. I don't think that they came from another planet in a different solar system that, I don't think they came from Zeta Reticuli. I think they came from previous aeon, like in Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology and sentient singularity theory. They both have successional verses, what I call them, or aeons. Doesn't really matter. And that's where I think they came from. But that means that they came from outside of our world, like not from a different planet in our world, which is our universe, is our world. They came from outside of that world, which makes the word extraterrestrial be more accurate in its description than I ever thought that it actually was. It is an interesting observation. But I'm still also working on going through Kurchai Mungel's latest interview of Luis Elizondo, the leader of the Pentagon's ATIP program. It's a fascinating interview so far. He basically admitted that the government has biological samples, he called them, but that means bodies. And also admitted that they have high definition photos of UFOs, or of, I call them UFOs, but of craft, where the craft are transparent, and they on camera, according to Luis Elizondo, can see the occupants inside the craft, and they have photos of it at the Pentagon, but they just have not declassified them. I know Luis Elizondo has been saying things like, when we understand what these things are, I think it's going to be humbling and help us understand what human really is. I think that makes a lot of sense with the idea that these are basically just what we are for this universe, they are for the previous one, and they left that one for reasons. I have theories on it, but I don't know. And they didn't join the assembly, it appears. Like, they are basically bees of a beehive and didn't become cells of an organism. So before you become cells of an organism, you go from individualized, atomized, unit that isn't part of a hive structure to, family structure, which is lineage structure, then caste structure, and then you get like a hive structure, and then you get this singularity after that, which is where you're not worker bees in a beehive that's almost a singular organism. You are cells of a body of an organism, which is a singular organism, essentially. It's like the next level of entanglement. And I think that these things are just further along in the eusocial evolutionary process, but they're basically just like what we are, but from a previous aeon, which means they're extraterrestrials. They are from outside of our world. It's fascinating. But I do know Bob Lazar said when he was on craft at Area S4, he saw a technician working and there was an archway inside the craft, and he saw it go transparent. And he said this in like late 80s, and now Luis Elizondo is saying that the Pentagon has photos, high definition photos of craft where the sides are transparent apparently, and they can see the occupants inside. I don't know what that picture looks like. I'm trying to picture what that picture looks like. That sounds like the creepiest picture in the world. If you've ever, we're gonna watch this clip from Signs. It's like the scariest clip in a movie, and where they see an alien. It's behind. That's what the name of the clip is. Everybody knows it. Look at this. This is the scariest movie in the world.
Move, children. Vámonos.
Like, think about the news showing like what happens when they show those photos. Is it going to be like people like that, like freaking out? Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what people are going to react to. So far, it's so much indifference to the idea that there's extraterrestrials around us, flying around. Nobody seems to care or know about it, and they're way too preoccupied, you know, with political figures and other nonsense. It kind of is mind-blowing. I do think it's partially because if you're not, it's odd. This topic is one of where if you're not mentally ready for it, it's like it just goes right over you, which is true of everything you're not ready for. But it's very odd with this one because this one has always been the topic where everybody has assumed if we discover aliens, it's going to be the biggest story in the world. And it is ignored right now. And they've discovered aliens, like on Earth, flying around all the time. Like, they've admitted basically admitted they have bodies. I mean, this is, that's so mind-blowing, and we're literally arguing about, like, everything else. My dog's gonna bark right now. But it's mind-blowing to me. I would never have expected this as the reaction to the announcement of, guys, there's flying saucers flying around and we have alien bodies in tunnels underneath, you know, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And nobody cares. I think it was the creator of Loop Quantum Gravity was talking with Eric Weinstein, and Eric Weinstein was like, you know, these UFOs that are now been announced, and the guy was like, what are you talking about? He had no idea. And he had to be explained that this was a phenomenon that had been admitted by our government on a live interview to the creator of Loop Quantum Gravity, and had been out. This had been talked about for almost a year at that point, probably more. And he, one of the, you know, leading physicists, not paying attention to it at all. How does that even make sense? It makes no sense. Like, a lot of things make sense to me in this world at this point. That one, still a mystery. I don't understand people's lack of interest in this topic. Other than I just think it's so overwhelming, And also just with everything else going on in the world, there's a lot going on in the world, I get it, but it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic going on or who just was elected. If the government comes out and says, we have, alien bodies, essentially, and there's UFOs flying around all the time, and we have high definition photos of it and video, and they release the lowest definition videos that they have purposely, you would think that this would be something everyone in the world would know, and people don't care. It makes no sense unless it's just such an overwhelming thing that people can't handle it, until literally CNN posts a clip like what we just saw from Signs, where it's like a photo of the beings. And it might be, honestly, that until we see something that we recognize as a consciousness, like if they showed like a robot that was flying around above us, like a transformer or something, I don't know, and that thing was doing hypersonic speeds, I don't think it would ever have the same impact as the day that they finally show us like a picture of a biological being that we look at and we identify with for the first time. If you see a flying saucer, you don't identify with it. If you see lights in the sky, you're not identifying with it, even if you acknowledge what it is. But if you see a humanoid that you recognize how it, maneuvers its world because it has 2 hands and 2 legs and a head and eyes, you're going to think about yourself. And when you think about yourself, it causes you to have feelings, because feelings are self-referential thoughts. And that's when I think everybody's going to have a totally different reaction than they have now. I don't know what it's going to be like. It's either going to be, maybe majority people think that these things are going to be our salvation, or maybe, and they become idols, or they end up being like panicked, like the reaction that you just saw from the movie. I can't even tell you what I would predict. It's going to be both, but what's the weight? How many people react this way versus how many people react the other way? I don't know. I don't think that these things are closer to God and more closer to enlightenment than we are. We get less and less enlightened as we get more technologically advanced. Why would it be different for them? Like we think that, oh, it's inevitable because they're more advanced than us. They'd be more conscious and things like that. No, we get less conscious the more technologically advanced they are. They're more technologically advanced than us. I think it seems inevitable that they are less spiritually conscious than we would be, not more. So, I mean, I'm not saying I know that, but that seems to be inevitable to me. Technology, if you don't form a singularity of mind, and I don't mean a hive mind like a beehive, I mean like a single organism, and I don't think that that's what these things are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. They would just be part of the previous aeon that we're running on. They wouldn't come into our world. They have more sovereignty, I think, they're less entangled if they're coming here. So I think that means that that their technology would follow the same exact patterns that it does for us. We're becoming more entangled, more of a hive mind. We're also losing wisdom, losing our enlightenment as we, get cooler smart devices. Probably the same. Have you ever seen The Mist? I've seen part of The Mist. I could tell that it had like metaphysics implications, even from the little bit that I saw, but I haven't seen enough to know much about it. Start by learning chords. I will definitely do that. One of the most effed up movies I've ever seen. I remember I saw the very end of it, and I remember thinking the same thing, that it was just really messed up. And I forgot why, like, everybody died or something like that. Forgot what happened, but it's not an ending of positivity, if I remember correctly. And I only saw the end. It's a Steven Spielberg movie, I think. Or the story is from Steven Spielberg. It's Stephen King, not Steven Spielberg. I think the story was by Stephen King, if I'm not mistaken. But I never read the book, and I never watched the whole movie. I just saw the end. And I remember it being depressing. I think we as a society are undergoing a crisis of trust belief, and that's a good thing. Yeah, I agree with you. I've thought about that too. We're not trusting the news anymore. But the thing is, we're trusting it when it's telling us what we want to hear, and we're not trusting it when it's telling us stuff that we don't see as relevant to us, and we don't want to hear. So it's like a superposition. We are simultaneously losing trust, but also simultaneously becoming sheep, which means you are like totally trusting of certain structures, which is, it's a superposition structure. We're doing both at the same time. You just have to worry about how you are doing it. Don't worry about what society's doing. You can't stop it. I'm guessing a lot of people just think it's China or Russia with better technology, or maybe some kind of government lie. Yeah, I think a lot of people think it's a government lie, but they believe everything else that comes out of CNN, and they are watching. And same thing with Fox. The people that watch Fox, they believe everything that comes out of Fox. None of them are focused on this. They're like talking about Biden, travel, I don't know. Whatever Biden says, I don't know. Like, I don't pay attention to politicians very much anymore. And they're not focusing on this at all. It's very weird. You would think it would be the most, like, it would draw everyone's interest, and it does not. Yeah, Stephen King. I'm starting to think UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, werewolves, fairies are all the same kind of phenomenon. They are and they aren't. I don't think that ETs are the same. I think they're using entanglement structures and frequencies that we don't operate on naturally in order to maneuver and manipulate matter in the world. I've not slept much and my voice is cracking. But they're going in and out of like our level and also the like metaphysical level as we would think about it, or the paranormal level. But I think that these other beings like Wendigos or demons and angels, I think they are literally beings that exist, and they're literally just on different frequency than we can pick up. If there are frequencies of light that you can see and frequencies that you can't, and frequencies of sound that you can hear and frequencies that you can't, there's almost certainly matter that is on frequencies that you can feel and that you can observe, and also matter that is on frequencies that you can't always. And I think that is what's happening with maybe fairies, maybe Bigfoot. I don't know. I haven't like looked into these things enough, but I do think that's what demons or like Wendigos or skinwalkers or angels and things like that are operating at. They're literally just probably material beings that are on a frequency that we just don't pick up. It's like just the radio isn't usually tuned to those frequencies. Every now and then probably does get tuned to those frequencies for some reason or another. And then we get, Bigfoot as what we would call a myth in our society, or skinwalkers or fairies and all of these things that people claim to have seen over the generations at certain points, but then you can't really see them whenever you want either. But the story of those beings does not seem to disappear. And that is something to not disregard. So it might be the fairies literally are just little like beings that exist on a frequency that we just don't normally perceive. I do think that's what we call angels and demons do exist on that frequency as well. So this whole phenomenon is linked. It is linked to the UFO phenomenon because I think their tech takes advantage of this. I think they know that there is matter. The interactions between you and matter around you have to do with vibration and frequencies and wavelengths and so maybe if you change the frequency of your UAP, your craft, to a certain frequency, maybe then you can go through a liquid like water in the ocean, like it's not even there, and then you change it to a different frequency to go through the air like it's not even there. And yes, the air does produce resistance that you would have to take into account if you're going 13,000 miles an hour, which is what Luis Elizondo said these things are doing. If you are not almost disregarding that in some way, you're not overcoming it by maybe just changing the frequency somehow of your craft to where you're making it so that the craft is on a different frequency than the water matter, and then it just doesn't interact. Kind of like maybe you can walk through an angel and like or a demon or I don't know, fairy, and like you wouldn't even see it, you wouldn't feel it unless maybe you're, I don't know, falling asleep and your frequency's changing as you're about to enter, being asleep, which it certainly does. And maybe you pick it up for a second, or you are somebody who naturally has variations in your frequency. Maybe we call those people schizophrenics. I don't know. But I've never seen fairies or Bigfoot, but I have seen like a Wendigo. And I thought it was a hallucination and it was nothing, but you can't believe that actually, and also understand that randomness is impossible mathematically. Like there has to be an input if there is an output, and it was just as real as any other experience I've ever had. So I now think that there is just matter that it is on frequencies that we just can't usually perceive, and whatever these extraterrestrials tech is, it takes advantage of that understanding in order to allow it to do all kinds of crazy things like warp and transmedium travel and all kinds of things like that. I was just listening to an episodes of Theories of the Third Kind about Skinwalker Ranch, and holy shit, Skinwalker Ranch seems very weird. Like I have listened to people talk about it, and I've listened to enough people who I take seriously say things that make no sense unless what I'm saying basically is true, is that there's just elements to material existence that we don't get or that we normally cannot perceive. And if that's true, what they perceive there and all the things that they have happen makes perfect sense. And it would interact with your consciousness, because your consciousness changes literally changes space-time. It has an impact on space-time. So that's one of the themes there, is that it seems to be linked to your own consciousness. There was a weird movie that I watched once on a plane that was with Natalie Portman. What's it called? It's like The Mist, but what is it called? Natalie Portman, the Shimmer. I remember the Shimmer. They called it the Shimmer in the movie, but it's not. That's not the Annihilation. The movie is called Annihilation, and in it, at the very end, she encounters this being that came from space in some way or something, and it has caused this weird, like, energy to grow in an area that alters information and DNA and consciousness of everything contained within it. And when she reaches the center of it, there's this being at the center that literally just mirrors her, and it's like linked to her consciousness, and it's very weird. And I can tell the movie has so much depth to it, but I also can't explain it very well. I don't know anybody that can. If you've ever seen the movie, you will understand. It is very weird. It's probably one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen. But it's also makes you think for some reason about things that you can't articulate. It's very weird. After hearing a Sufi Survivor Man, and that Survivor Man, Les Stroud, I was a huge fan of Les Stroud growing up. I watched Survivor Man all the time, and I would go and like test out all his techniques on things. Like I remember making needle and thread out of agave plants and stuff like that because I saw it on his show Survivor Man. He had a great show. That was one of the best shows ever out there. It was probably so cheap to make, and it was real and in a way that I've never seen anything else. It wasn't like Bear Grylls or something where he's like squeezing. I remember watching Bear Grylls squeeze the moisture out of elephant dung into his mouth so that he wouldn't die of thirst. I'm like, dude, you're gonna die of dehydration because you're going to get a parasite and it's gonna cause you to lose all your fluids out every single orifice of your body. Like, that's not survival. It was ridiculous. Did I see him on Kurt's channel? I watched most of it. I really liked the interview. I think I might have finished it. I think I did finish it. I think I was just also working at the time, so I was like watching, but not like I wasn't just watching it. I was listening to it and also working. But it was very good. It's funny, Kurt had on Richard Dolan, and Chris Langan and Les Stroud, and I mean so many other people that are more obvious to the field that we talk about and involving physics and consciousness and things like that. But a lot of people that I have just been fans of for a while. Like if I could have picked a ufologist to go on any show and listen to, it's definitely going to be Richard Dolan. I do think Stephen Greer knows more than anyone, but I also wonder if he knows a lot of disinformation and doesn't able to tell the difference. I hope that's the case, because if he's right about everything that he says, it's like another level. Like I almost can't listen to Stephen Greer. He talks about things that, like that the government is going to fake a UFO invasion and that there are extraterrestrials, but they're peaceful and they're not a threat. But then that the real threat is that our governments or our deep state is going to fake an invasion because they have, electrogravitic craft that we can't tell the difference of, them and extraterrestrial craft. I hope he's wrong, but it could all be true. But I don't know what, I don't agree with the idea that these beings around us are totally benevolent. Like once I was talking to somebody who seemed to just be very involved in this topic for, many, many years. And I had just started thinking about it. This was a few years ago. And I asked him, like, he's saying that that extraterrestrials were a threat to humanity and they were enslaving us and we didn't know it. I do think they're monitoring us and tagging us and they're doing all the things we do to animals. But I asked him, I was like, so you think that they're just evil, all of them? And he was like, some people, he said something like, some people eat deer and some people love, or some people eat goats and some people have pet goats or something like that. And some people have pet goats and eat them too. And, it just made me realize, I was like, yeah, it's not a clear-cut answer probably of, are these good or bad? It's like, I don't know. Do you like deer? But also, have you ever hunted a deer? Do you like cows? I really like cows. I've always liked cows. I also eat steak. I ate the best steak of my life in Hawaii while I was on vacation. And I enjoyed it a lot. But that cow, if cows knew what I was doing, they would think I was so evil and twisted for murdering one of their, their brothers and carving him up and, roasting him over a fire and then eating him. Like, think about that. And I'm not saying that's what's happening to us, but could be being used for, I don't know, DNA or harvesting or something. Who knows? But I don't think that the idea that, they're Stephen Greer seems to think that they're all entirely benevolent is the rhetoric that I've heard. That doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it's good that we think that, because if you don't think that and you try and, if the cows try and rebel against the farmers, it's not going to go very well. Maybe it's best to just be ignorant of what the farmers are doing, when you're not in their own homes or on their own grills. But, you know, I don't know. I think about this a lot as this has become more and more, I don't know, revealed. And I think it's going to be just like us. It's going to be like, they probably help. Sometimes you find an animal that's hurt. If you found a hurt chicken and you were like, oh, that chicken's hurt, I'm going to bring it to the vet. And then sometimes you find a chicken, then you cook it up and eat it and make chicken nuggets out of it. Like it's the same person that can do both of those things. So I think this is that, just think about it like that is probably the most likely way of thinking about it. There is no entirely benevolent beings and also entirely evil beings of any group of beings that exist, that I know of at least. I mean, I've seen monitor lizards murder each other. Murder. Not fight and accidentally kill each other. Purposely, intentionally set out to murder each other. And they know how to do it. That's a monitor lizard is like a Komodo dragon. A lot of lizards will bite during mating. Monitors do not ever bite during mating because their teeth are too dangerous and they'll kill each other, or they'll tear each other up if they do that. But they know how to. They don't bite during mating because they know that that's dangerous. That would, harm them. Just as much as you know that you can't, I don't know, hit somebody with a knife and expect it to not cause damage. Like, they know that just as well. And they also know that they can use those as weapons, and I've seen them do it, not in a fight. When they fight, they don't fight with their teeth usually. They just kind of like wrestle with each other because they know that they'll kill each other. But then I've also seen them purposely, intentionally kill each other. They're just like us. Every level is like us. And people are like, what's the feelings like of a molecule if it's alive? The same as us. Happy, sad, scared, bored, excited, content. Like, these are the emotions of the universe, and they are universal. Like, why would it be different? I said earlier that there are biologists who think lizards have no feelings that are similar to us. They're just like little robots. They have fear and anger and humor. I literally watch my geckos laugh at each other when they fall. It's weird, but they do it. And they have friends, which means they have affection for some, and they have mates that they get along with and better, and then they did others, and they form relationships and have falling out, and they have enemies. So if they have those interactions that are the same as us, they have the same emotions as us. It might not be that, they can create a Tesla Model S, but like, they still laugh at each other when they watch each other fall. And it doesn't matter what you think they lack, because you are a neuroscientist who dissected a lizard brain and you saw that there was one part that was really small compared to mammals or something. It doesn't matter. Emotions are universal qualities of sentience. They're not something that is only... They're not something that exists or doesn't exist based on the brain. The brain regulates how much exists in certain instances, but not whether or not. There's no person on Earth that is a normal person on any spectrum that doesn't have the same emotions as you and me, even if they're much more easy to anger, or they're much more relaxed and chill, like living on Maui or something like that. They still have the same emotions. It's just in different amounts. That's not even almost certainly true. It's certainly true that there are differences between species, and there are also differences between individuals within species. And that's got to be true of literally different atoms. There are gold atoms that are probably have a slightly different temperament than other gold atoms. Maybe we call those isotopes or something like that. I don't know. But I guarantee you it exists. It's just going to be hard to see potentially, even if that means it's right in front of your face and you just don't recognize it. Or it could be that it's not right in front of your face and you have to find it. I don't know. But if isotopes are different personalities of elements, then it's right in front of our face and it's hard to see it. If they're not, then it's probably more difficult to see it. But I have no idea either way. I just thought of that just now. So don't take that as like, something I've given much thought to. I will say though, I guarantee you they do have emotions. And they're the same emotions as you and me. The same exact ones. That I do know. It's just inevitable. The emotions are the motivating and orienting. They are the information that is, after it's processed, it becomes information that comes from perception and then is oriented around how it is relates to the self. And so it's just inevitable that orients you, which it means that it also allows you to maneuver, and that is what allows for growth and interactions, whether that is, interactions between atoms or interactions between hadrons even in a nucleus, or interactions between chemicals and compounds or cells or organisms. It doesn't matter. Like, it's all the same. It's just hard to see. That's why so many zoos breeding projects fail. If they eat our meat, they just have some biochemistry as us. Aliens will be beyond needing meat for energy. Why would they be beyond? I mean, I don't think they eat us, by the way. I was just saying that. I'm using cows as an example, but if they're doing anything, they're doing something that we don't yet have as part of our science, like relating to the energy of consciousness, probably, or also probably DNA related harvesting. Probably wouldn't be harvesting like us and turning us into burgers, like that Twilight Zone. It's like To Serve Man, and he's like, it's a cookbook. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's a very famous Twilight Zone, and where the aliens have like a book that they are trying to translate, and they translate it, and it means to serve man. They think that these things have come to help them, and then in the end, they realize that they mistranslated it, and it means it's a cookbook, basically, how to serve man, like how to make the best, burgers out of humans. Synthetic food? What is synthetic food? I don't know what synthetic food is. I mean, they are GMOs. Like, that is almost a guaranteed. They have altered their genes. It's probably made them pretty much infertile and having to rely on like cloning and things like that to make more. And I mean, that basically turns them into a beehive. We're going to alter our genes with CRISPR. We already started down that path over the past year and a half with things related to mRNA. And I know it's not the same, but CRISPR is the next step, and we will do it in the next few years. China already did it on 2 baby girls. And I think that the more we alter our genes, the more infertile we're going to make ourselves over time. Eventually, we're going to have a children of men like issue, I think. Genes need to line up. If they don't, your body's systems will stop development. I know this because this is what happens usually when you have an early miscarriage, which is what I just went through. And like I asked them when they told us, oh, your body is not producing the hormone that is telling the fetus to grow. I said, okay, what do we do now? Do we just do supplemental hormones to make it grow if the body isn't doing it? And they said no, because you have to trust that the body is doing this for a reason. It's probably a genetic misalignment in some way. And your body recognizes it and shuts down development. So you wouldn't want to push development even if you could. that means that some types of incongruences of information in genes cause us to have issues with our reproduction. If you're going to be doing CRISPR on things over generations, I think that it's going to become, your DNA is going to become increasingly unraveled with every successive generation after you introduce out of context information, which is non-information. You've literally taken a self-referencing information code that is entirely information and has come from naturally building incentive structures and processes, and you've injected information that you know is information, but it's out of context of the chain that is self-referencing, and that means that to the chain, it's non-information over time, especially over a lineage. This is what I think. I hope I'm wrong. And I hope it's the opposite, and whatever damage you do gets rectified, and it's possible over successive generations. That is possible. I hope that's the case. I don't think that's the case. I think that if you mess with your genes enough, you're going to turn infertile, and then you're going to have to rely on cloning to continue your species. And I think that this is pretty much an inevitability for a large portion of our society. Our dating is going to, within the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to have dating apps where you only match on Tinder with, you will select a GMO match or a non-GMO match, because some people will have CRISPR treatments and vaccines and things, and some people will choose to not get it. And like, it's going to literally divide society completely. It's going to be crazy. I know that sounds like doom and gloom, but I'm not doom and gloom, but we are going to go through the shit before we go to, the Messianic era. I had the best chicken of my life in Hawaii, so you win that one. Dude, chicken is... I had the best food of my life in Hawaii. I had a seared ahi burger, and it was one of the best things I've ever had. I wonder if that's true for earless monitors. I don't know what we were talking about when you said that. I'll think about it. But, oh yeah, earless monitors, they bite when they breed? Probably not. They have very sharp teeth, from what I've heard, as well. You look at Gila monsters and Heloderma, which are kind of like also related, like those venomous lizards, beaded lizards. They don't bite when they breed either because it's dangerous. But if like you're a gecko, then that's part of it. Or an iguana or something. Plus make use synthetic food. Elk and bear meat have to be better, right? I don't know. I mean, if elk and bear meat are better. I don't think they have to be. I wouldn't want to eat a bear. It's not kosher. But it also sounds like it's not the best meat, but I've heard some people love it and some people don't. I have no real desire to try it. Alligator is good, though. It's also not kosher, but it's pretty good. They're like bananas or bulldogs in a way. Oh yeah, like they're basically like they're no longer. I didn't know. Are you saying bananas are no longer able to reproduce themselves? Kind of like bulldogs are just like their head is too big. They need like a C-section. You can already see easy examples. I've heard that an alkaline environment is better for fetal development. Maybe, I have no idea, but you might be right. But we are going to, if we mess with our genes, we're going to mess with our reproduction. We're already messing with it because of hormones in the environment and things like that. And it's pretty obvious, like male sperm count in developed countries has decreased by, I'm pretty sure, 50% in the last like 40 years. 50%. That's crazy. And it's almost certainly has to do with plastics. That's what I would think. Elk burgers are very good. Anyways, I'm going to get going. But I appreciate everybody who was here. Tomorrow we're going to get more in depth to the discussion that Stephen Wolfram was having that we started touching on, but I need to listen to more of it before that stream. But it is a great stream. I highly recommend watching it, even if you're going to listen to this stream tomorrow. It's the best interview I've ever heard Wolfram do, because he's starting to admit that this type of work, or the implications of sentient singularity theory, or even conscious agent theory, but even there's a dividing line there a bit. Like, consciousness is, you can't avoid it. It's part of this. He brought up the soul. He was like talking about the soul having weight. The soul does not have weight. People have tried to figure out what the weight of the soul was, and they've tried to do tests before where they even measured people's weights right at the moment of death. And there was an experiment that supposedly showed that somebody got lighter after they died because the soul left the body, I think, and then they were never able to recreate it. But my work involving the experiment that I would like to do implies that there will be gravitational effects that would impact an organism or a cell or even structures beyond that. But it's the opposite of what seems intuitive. It doesn't get, and we'll talk about, I'll do a whole stream on the experiment pretty soon, but it's the opposite of what is intuitive. The soul has negative weight. It's not positive weight. If you have a soul in your body, you're not heavier, you're lighter. Lighter, really. But it's like, we observe this in mass defect already, in like atomic nuclei and molecules. So it's not unknown in certain levels of the periodicity of existence already, but it's just not understood as to what's really happening, even though they know the math of what's happening. The math is not the same as the reason for the math. I have said to people involving lots of topics that are political and social, especially, where people will notice certain patterns involved with certain demographics and genders and ideologies and things like that. And the reality is that people will almost like think they've figured it out because they see the pattern. Seeing the pattern is not the same as understanding why it's there. And just because you know the math, which is the observable pattern, does not mean that you know why it's there. Just because they can predict mass defect because they know the equation does not mean they understand why it's happening. You cannot be an atheist or an anti-theist and actually understand why mass defect is happening. It is a conscious action. That's why. But we'll talk more about it in a different stream. I appreciate everybody here. Atrazine. I forgot what that is. Atrazine. Oh yeah, it's like chemicals in the water. Turning the frogs gay. As Alex Jones would say. The male grip strength has decreased significantly. That makes perfect sense. So glad you got married to a wonderful woman and your herping success in Hawaii. That is all just amazing. Thank you. I recommend everybody search for a spouse if you are attracted to the opposite sex. Like, it is freeing and meaning, and entirely, society is depending on it. Get married like society is depending on it, because it is literally depending on it. And I planned on talking more about morals in this, but we will bring it up later. But there is a morality is as much a hard science as physics. It is inevitable. And so is sociology, and so is every other field that is true. So I recommend everybody get their own wonderful woman. There's so many out there, and men are not marrying them, and it really makes me so sad sometimes. And pick one that you get along with, and then go on a honeymoon to Hawaii. And I'll recommend some good restaurants. But peace And I will see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 on here. Like I said, if you want to be part of our Discord discussion on Thursday, message me. It's at 7 p.m. And I have a friend who might be joining us who is very well versed on like theology and metaphysics, and that should be a good conversation. I'm looking forward to it. So I will talk with you guys tomorrow, and mahalo. Hopefully I said that right.